You're standing at the edge of the known world, not the modern globe-trotting, GPS-dotted world, but the raw, wind-bitten, sea-stained map of the 8th century. Behind you, a sparse Scandinavian village smelling faint. So were you a savage or a misunderstood entrepreneur with a sword and a dream? That's still up for debate. But one thing's certain. When you stepped onto Lindisfarne that foggy day, you didn't just change a monastery, you kicked off a Viking era. One that echoed through history, written in steel and salt. You're a Viking boy named Sigurd. Second born, which in your world means first in line for danger and second in line for literally everything else. No inheritance, no land, no golden goblet waiting for you when your father retires, because he won't. He'll probably keel over mid-raid with a battle axe still lodged in someone else's shoulder. Welcome to the family business. You grow up in a village near the Danish Sea, where the salt air is thick and every lull in the waves feels like the world holding its breath. Your father is a chieftain, tall, terrifying, and always either sharpening a blade or glaring at someone who isn't. He smells like iron and sweat and the faint undertone of ocean rot. You adore him. You fear him. You want to be him. He doesn't teach you how to be soft. He teaches you how to swing a wooden sword until your fingers blister, how to hold a shield until your arm goes numb, and how to shout at your enemies until they feel it in their bones. These games are training, and they come with real bruises and fewer rules than goat herding. When you're not getting smacked in the face with a practice spear, you're watching your father's longship disappear into the horizon, only to return weeks later, low in the water from the weight of stolen silver, silk, and stories. You pretend not to stare, you fail. You learn early, longboats are everything, fast, sleek, and terrifyingly silent until the oars hit water. The best ones can slip up rivers, nose into marshes, and be gone before the alarm bells finish ringing. Your people don't do sieges, too messy, too long. Instead, you strike in the dark with precision and speed, and the kind of chaos that makes bards shiver while writing. The raids aren't random. Chieftains like your father choose the target carefully, isolated, wealthy, lightly defended like monasteries or fishing villages, somewhere with treasure and no standing army. You're not an empire builder, you're a hit-and-run artist with a passion for loot and a strong dislike of equal fights. The stories of raiding spread faster than fire on a dry roof. One Viking returns home loaded with gold and suddenly everyone's grabbing their axes. The population's growing, the farms aren't. People are hungry, bored, or just itching to see if the rumors about fat monks and golden chalices are true. Spoiler, they are. You train harder. Your wooden sword becomes iron. You start joining the raids. The ocean becomes your road. Foreign shores become familiar. You learn to read the stars like a map, the clouds like omens. You see conflict, you see fear, you see riches. You also learn the truth. Not all Vikings win. Some fall far from home, arrows in their backs, dreams half finished. But you keep going, because you're Sigurd Bjornsson, second son, first into the fray. And the world, it will remember your name, whether it wants to or not. You're no longer just a kid swinging wooden swords at tree trunks. You're older now, taller. Your hands are calloused, your arms corded with muscle, and your eyes sharpened from years spent squinting across the sea. But if you want to rise, really rise in the Viking world, it's time to master more than brute force. You need finesse. You need the bow. Every proper Viking boy, especially one dreaming of glory, has to prove himself not just in the clash of axes, but in the silence of the hunt. Archery contests aren't just idle fun, they're the proving grounds, the places where boys become warriors with nothing more than a taut string and a good eye, and you've got both. You're not the biggest, not the loudest, but when that arrow flies, it sings. You shoot by moonlight, you shoot from boats. You shoot blindfolded because your brother dared you to, and you hit the post anyway. The elders nod, the younger kids stare. In the sagas, the greats were archers too, men who split arrows, felled deer mid-gallop, or struck enemies across rivers with a single pull. You've read the tales, you aim to join them, but bows and arrows are just the beginning. Your arsenal expands. You get your first real javelin. Not a training one, this one's sharpened, balanced, heavy with promise. It hums in your hand like it's alive. You practice throwing it at straw targets, then trees, then into the ocean just to watch the splash. One day soon, you'll aim at something that bleeds. And then there are the axes. Not the ones for chopping firewood, these are built for splitting skulls and you can feel the difference. There's weight, but not clumsiness, it's all edge and intent. Some are single-bladed, sleek and fast. Others are double-headed beasts, made for men who want to make a statement, preferably a conflicty one. You learn to spot the difference between a tool and a weapon. Sometimes it's not obvious. The same axe your uncle used to fell trees last week could become a battle axe by tomorrow, but in the graves, when you see an axe buried with a man, decorated, balanced, sacred, you know, that wasn't just a woodcutter. The lance is next, tall, sharp, and deceptively simple. It's a favorite for a reason. Cheap, fast to make, deadly if you know what you're doing. You practice thrusting, spinning, stabbing from horseback and on foot. It's not flashy, it's just effective. You like that about it. Then comes the seax, a massive knife that feels more like a short sword. It's a severe thing, designed not for grace but for getting the job done. You wear it on your belt like a badge, and when you hold it, people give you space. You like that too. But the dream, the sword, not the practice blades you used as a child, not the scavenged iron of fallen foes, a real Viking sword, gleaming, weighted, beautiful, decorated not just for looks but to say something. This warrior matters. You don't just own a sword, you inherit it, earn it, maybe name it, because in the Viking world, swords are legend makers. The sagas remember their names. Yours could be next. Most won't get one. Too rare, too expensive. But you, Sigurd Bjornsson, you're not most. Your shield is always with you, painted, reinforced with iron, bearing the scars of battles past. Not everyone gets a helmet, not everyone wears armor, but everyone brings a shield. Without it, you're dead before your sword even clears the scabbard. And so you train, not for sport, not for play, but because out there across the sea, someone is watching you, sizing you up, wondering if your blade is faster than theirs. You plan to make sure it is. Your shield isn't just a circle of wood and metal, it's your lifeline, your bedroll, your stretcher, and when needed, your battering ram. You, Sigurd Bjornsson, don't just carry it, you wear it like a second skin. It's a slab of planked wood, thick as your thigh, rimmed with iron, heavy enough to stop a javelin mid-flight if you angle it right. The boss in the center, that rounded metal dome, can crack a man's nose with one good shove, and you know this because you've done it. You've learned quickly where the shield ends and vulnerability begins. Above the head and below the knees, those are the danger zones. That's where the clever enemy aims. But when you fight in a shield wall, shoulder to shoulder with your kin, left arms locked in rhythm, shields overlapping like dragon scales, you're not just a warrior, you're a wall of thunder. Your right hand, that's your blade. Your axe, your javelin, whatever's ready to make a statement. The left stays steady, firm, behind the shield, because if that shield drops, so do you. Forget the horned helmet fantasy, that's opera nonsense. 19th century daydreams sung by baritones and dressed by costume designers who never had to dodge an arrow. Real helmets were plain, domed, made of iron or steel, and tight enough to keep your skull intact. No flair, just function. Horns, that's how you get hooked and dragged off your horse by someone with better aim. And the armor, you wear mail, link after link, heavy as regret, but stronger than faith. It guards your chest, your back, your stomach, but not your arms. You leave those free because no Viking wants to swing an axe like he's wrapped in fishnets. Instead, you layer up with leather and fur, practical, warm, and just enough protection to make the difference between a deep cut and a lost sentence. After battle, if you're lucky, or S defeated, you walk it off. If you're not and your leg's got a hole the size of a turnip, your shield becomes your stretcher. You lie there, gritting your teeth, as your brothers carry you over muddy fields and burning longships. A tool, a defense, and a way home. But life isn't all blades and bruises. You drink. Of course you drink. You're a Viking, and the mead hall is your temple. Inside it, the fire roars, the ale flows, and the stories grow taller with every horn raised. You're barely old enough to grow a beard, but you've already raised a mug, already heard your name chanted after a raid. You listen as the skalds, the poets, spin sagas of warriors past, of gods who bled starlight and ships that sailed on thunder. You watch your chieftain in his high seat, richly cloaked, ringed with his chosen warriors glowing in firelight. The best guests sit close, the best stories. They echo through the rafters, carried by voices soaked in drink and pride. You don't say much, not yet. Most won't get one. Too rare, too expensive. But you, Sigurd Bjornsson, you're not most. Your shield is always with you, painted, reinforced with iron, bearing the scars of battles past. Not everyone gets a helmet, not everyone wears armor, but everyone brings a shield. Without it, you're dead before your sword even clears the scabbard. And so you train, not for sport, not for play, but because out there, across the sea, someone is watching you, sizing you up, wondering if your blade is faster than theirs. You plan to make sure it is. Your shield isn't just a circle of wood and metal. It's your lifeline, your bedroll, your stretcher, and when needed, your battering ram. You, Sigurd Bjornsson, don't just carry it. You wear it like a second skin. It's a slab of planked wood, thick as your thigh, rimmed with iron, heavy enough to stop a javelin mid-flight if you angle it right. The boss in the center, that rounded metal dome, can crack a man's nose with one good shove. And you know this because you've done it. You've learned quickly where the shield ends and vulnerability begins. Above the head and below the knees, those are the danger zones. That's where the clever enemy aims. But when you fight in a shield wall, shoulder to shoulder with your kin, left arms locked in rhythm, shields overlapping like dragon scales, you're not just a warrior, you're a wall of thunder. Your right hand, that's your blade, your axe, your javelin, whatever's ready to make a statement. The left stays steady, firm, behind the shield, because if that shield drops, so do you. Forget the horned helmet fantasy. That's opera nonsense. 19th century daydreams sung by baritones and dressed by costume designers who never had to dodge an arrow. Real helmets were plain, domed, made of iron or steel, and tight enough to keep your skull intact. No flair, just function. Horns. That's how you get hooked and dragged off your horse by someone with better aim. And the armor, you wear mail, link after link, heavy as regret, but stronger than faith. It guards your chest, your back, your stomach, but not your arms. You leave those free because no Viking wants to swing an axe like he's wrapped in fishnets. Instead, you layer up with leather and fur, practical, warm, and just enough protection to make the difference between a deep cut and a lost sentence. After battle, if you're lucky, or defeated, you walk it off. If you're not, and your leg's got a hole the size of a turnip, your shield becomes your stretcher. You lie there, gritting your teeth as your brothers carry you over muddy fields and burning longships, a tool, a defense, and a way home. But life isn't all blades and bruises. You drink. Of course you drink. You're a Viking, and the mead hall is your temple. Inside it, the fire roars, the ale flows, and the stories grow taller with every horn raised. You're barely old enough to grow a beard, but you've already raised a mug, already heard your name chanted after a raid. You listen as the skalds, the poets, spin sagas of warriors past, of gods who bled starlight and ships that sailed on thunder. You watch your chieftain in his high seat, richly cloaked, ringed with his chosen warriors glowing in firelight. The best guests sit close. The best stories? They echo through the rafters, carried by voices soaked in drink and pride. You don't say much, not yet. But one day, when the fire crackles low and the old skalds call for tales, they'll speak of you, Sigurd Bjornsson. And your story? It'll start with a shield, a ship, and the boy who dared to swing both. The mead hall is humming, thick with smoke, laughter, and the sound of horns, both the kind you drink from and the kind you don't dare spill. You, Sigurd, sit somewhere in the middle, not yet a legend, but old enough to dream about it. The mead tastes like courage, the fire crackles like applause. Toasts are made, vows sworn, sometimes through tears, sometimes through slurred grins. Alliances are inked not with quills, but with shared cups and nods across the table. This is more than drinking, this is ceremony. Around you, the elders speak of Odin and Thor, of giants and fate, of ancestors who felled dragons with nothing but rage and a spear. You soak it in like it's the last warmth before a winter raid. One day, they'll speak of you. You'll see to that. But not as a berserker. No, thank you. Berserkers are different. The stories say they fight shirtless, sometimes bare-skinned, wrapped in animal skins and madness. They howl like wolves, they bleed but don't notice, they defeat but don't always aim. Some say they're possessed, others say they're cursed. In the meat hall they're respected, feared, and kept at arm's length. You, Sigurd, want glory, not frothing lunacy. You want your saga sung, not whispered in terror. Still, you can't deny the allure, the way their eyes burn, the way they move like lightning, like a storm with a heartbeat. They're legends. But you're something else. You're sharp. You're calculated. You don't need madness. You've got defeat, and not every warrior looks like you. Whispers pass down the table about shield maidens, women who fight as fiercely as any man, swords in hand, eyes cold as winter rivers. You've seen the sagas, the carvings, even some jewelry etched with women bearing arms. For years, they were dismissed as myth. But then someone re-examined a burial in Birka, Sweden. A grave packed with weapons, battle gear, clearly a warrior. Everyone assumed it was a man until someone checked the bones. It was a woman. You raise your horn to that. Now your moment has come. You're leaving the fires, the stories, the comforts of home. Your first raid awaits. You stand at the docks, staring up at the beast of a ship that will carry you to glory or ruin. The longboat, its prow snarls like a dragon, its wood creaks with purpose, sleek, shallow, fast, built to slip into rivers, to sail oceans, to vanish before enemies know they're under attack. 30 meters of fear carved into timber. A crew of 50, maybe more. The finest shipbuilders in the world made these, balancing length, width, weight like sculptors with axes. You step aboard, the salt air bites, the wind rises, the oars dip, the world tilts forward, and you, Sigurd Bjornsson, are finally sailing into your saga. You're no longer the wide-eyed second son staring out at the sea. You're Sigurd Bjornsson, seasoned raider, gleaming in polished mail, your sword no longer a hand-me-down, but a custom-forged thing of deadly beauty. You've made your mark. You've returned from raids not just alive, but triumphant, arms full of silver, eyes scanning for the next big prize. Back home, folks whisper that maybe it's time you settled down, found a good Viking girl, built a longhouse, grew some barley. You laugh, not unkindly, but like a man who knows that the sound of waves and clashing steel calls louder than lullabies. And anyway, there's more than one way to get rich. Sure, glory's nice, but silver is better, and if you can't raid it, you can tax it. Enter the Danelaw special, Danegeld. It's protection money, plain and simple. You and your crew roll up in your longboat, all 250 of you, and suddenly the local chieftain is very interested in negotiation. He pays you to not burn his town to the ground. Everyone wins. You get silver. He gets peace. His sheep stay unroasted. His villagers stay unskewered. Sometimes the payment's fair, sometimes it's highway robbery, dressed in furs. But it's always better than the alternative, especially when there's precedent. Like that time in 1012, when some poor fools thought they could skimp on the second payment after their bishop had already been captured. Spoiler, bad move. The Vikings got drunk. The bishop got dead. Lesson learned, always pay the second invoice. You've become more than a warrior now. You're an enforcer, a collector, a man whose presence alone sends tax coffers opening like flower buds in spring. You don't just raid anymore, you manage. You remind people that safety costs, that iron speaks louder than sermons, that there are worse things than losing a bit of silver. And still, you sail. Because this isn't just about gold or guts anymore. It's about power, legacy. You're not just part of the crew. You're becoming the kind of man people follow, the kind whose name they mutter when they see a longship on the horizon and start praying they paid their dues. You're Sigurd Bjornsson, Viking, collector, raider, professional nightmare. And you're just getting started. The fire in the mead hall burns low, casting long shadows on the faces of warriors grown thick with mead and tales. Sigurd leans forward, cup in hand, eyes locked on the man across the hall. A trader, clearly, but not the kind that drifts in from the coast with salted fish and dull gossip. No, this one is different. His clothes shimmer strangely, his belt is inlaid with foreign metalwork, and his accent wraps around words like a river around stone. He's no stranger to battle either. His beard is braided in the style of the East. And when he speaks, the name he gives himself is Varangian. Sigurd is hooked. Well, this man didn't sail west, didn't raid English monasteries or extort towns in return for peace. He went east through rivers that twist like serpents across the wild lands of what is now Russia, Belarus, Ukraine. Where Sigurd saw abbeys and Anglo-Saxons, this man saw Byzantium, glittering, holy, and impossibly rich. Constantinople, the great city. He speaks of it like it's half a dream and half a fire-breathing beast, full of marble and gold and emperors who hired Norsemen to swing swords in their name. And Sigurd, seasoned as he is, suddenly feels like a farm boy listening to tales of dragons for the first time. The Varangian Guard, the stranger says, was made up of warriors like them, but hand-picked by Byzantine emperors, paid in silk, respected, feared. They weren't just raiders, they were elite, loyal to the loss, guardians of palaces and symbols of power. But it wasn't all golden glory. The journey east was long and severe. Rivers froze in winter, choked in spring. Bandits prowled the banks, the land was harsh, the people harsher. Yet still the Vikings went. They founded settlements, carved cities out of wilderness, the Rus, the roots of Russia. These weren't just raids, they were blueprints for empire. Sigurd listens, imagining the great rivers, the sprawling forests, the idea that Vikings didn't just vanish into history after the raids, they melted into it, changed it, left fingerprints on everything from the language of Dublin to the architecture of Kiev. And when the stranger pulls out a small coin stamped with a Byzantine cross and places it on the table, Sigurd leans forward and runs a calloused thumb across it. Smooth, cold, heavy with stories. He smiles, because he knows deep down that the saga of the Vikings isn't just his, it's everywhere, east and west, from Newfoundland to Constantinople, from the ginger hair in an Irishman to the echoes of Norse in English kitchens. And maybe, just maybe, his next voyage won't head toward Wessex. It'll follow the rivers eastward toward empire. Sometimes your fate turns not on the battlefield, but in a mead hall with a sideways glance, a smirk too long held, and one ill-advised flirtation with the wrong warriors intended. Sigurd Bjornsson, raider, collector, dreamer of Byzantium, learns this the hard way. The girl had laughed. That was the mistake. Not his words, not his boast. The laugh, loud, bright, unignorable, and the man sitting beside her, red-faced and gripping his ale horn like he wanted to crush it, had made his choice. The challenge came swiftly, a muttered curse, a slap across the mouth, and a crowd parting like the sea. No one begged peace. This was Viking justice, and there was only one way out, the Holmgang. A duel, but not just a fight in the dirt, a sacred codified event. An island, or in this case a cleared space outside the longhouse, became the arena. A cloak was laid flat, 3 feet square. Hazel rods marked the corners. This was the hazel field, a space of judgment. Sigurd prepared with the cold clarity of a man who's faced worse odds with fewer witnesses. He stripped to his waist, offered a quick prayer to Odin, or perhaps now, half-whispered thoughts to the Christ God, who seemed to be gaining popularity, and stepped onto the field. Each man had a shield bearer, a companion steady and loyal, holding a shield to absorb blows, deflect strikes, buy time. It was severe ballet, 3 shields per fighter, 3 chances. Steel clashed under starlight. The crowd was silent save for the hiss of breath and the occasional prayer or curse. The first shield cracked. Splinters flew. The second shield dented, the edge folding like leather under Sigurd's blow. By the third, it was clear Sigurd was not just lucky, he was better, stronger, hungrier. The final strike landed clean. There was no need for a second blow. The other man lay still. Justice, it seemed, was on Sigurd's side, or perhaps the gods just liked a good story. But fatal duels, even sacred ones, complicate things. The mead hall, once warm and rowdy, grows colder around him. Whispers follow, glances linger too long, one too many fights, one too many debts. And so as morning creeps over the fjord, Sigurd packs light, armor, blade. The coin from Constantinople he'd never stop carrying. He nods to a few who mattered, avoids the eyes of the rest. The road east awaits, through rivers and forest, toward a city of marble and flame. The Varangian Guard still takes men like him, hard men, wandering men, warriors looking for a new cause, a new coin. Sigurd Bjornsson isn't running, he's marching toward destiny. The conflict has barely dried from the Holmgang when the true price of victory reveals itself. Sigurd Bjornsson may have won the duel, may have stood unshaken as the crowd roared and the gods nodded in approval, but politics doesn't care for honor. The dead man's family, rich with silver and soaked in influence, begins to whisper. Then they speak, then they demand. They can't defeat him openly, not without igniting a feud that might spiral through generations. But they can make life unlivable. Friends grow distant. Orders stop coming. The longhouse door feels heavier each time he passes through it. And Sigurd, hardened though he is, understands what this means. It's time to go. The East has always called to him, whispers of the roofs, of rivers that glitter with coin, of cities built not of timber and turf, but marble and fire. Constantinople, the queen of cities, where Northmen become guards to emperors, where a man with a strong arm and no past can forge a new name in steel and gold. So he sails. Through fjords and channels, down the Baltic coast, past Novgorod and Kiev, along the great artery of the Dnieper River. The longboat is smaller this time, lean, efficient, fast. His crew is mixed, some traders, some warriors, all chasing new beginnings, all running from old ones. The journey is perilous, storms rise, bandits lurk, but Sigurd has seen worse, and now that his course is set, nothing will turn him back. Then one morning, through the morning mist, she rises. Constantinople, not a city, a continent wearing stone as jewelry. Spires and domes pierce the sky. Walls that dwarf any fortress he's ever known. Markets overflowing with silk and spices. Languages he doesn't understand echo from alleyways. And somewhere within all of it, the Varangian Guard. Sigurd presents himself at the gates. His name is strange on their tongues, but his weapons, his armor, the scars on his knuckles, those speak fluently. He is tested, he is watched, and finally accepted, not as a guest, as a warrior, as a Varangian. He dons new armor now, scale plates that catch the sun, a kite shield long enough to cover half his body, a helm with a mail curtain that shimmers with menace, no longer the rounded gear of the fjords. This is imperial steel. This is the armor of a soul-faller trusted to guard emperors, to hold the line when even the palace trembles. And Sigurd, once a boy in a mead hall, once a defeater in a hazel field, now walks the marble halls of Byzantium. He doesn't look back, he doesn't need to, because now he's not just writing a saga, he's living it. And so we leave Sigurd Bjornsson standing at the gates of Constantinople, steel-eyed, sun-scarred, and storm-forged. A Viking no longer raiding, no longer collecting tribute, but now seeking purpose in the glittering heart of the Eastern Empire. He is older, wiser, but in his heart the drumbeat remains the same, to live by the sword, and if need be, to fall by it. A warrior still. A man with one hand on his blade and the other stretched toward legend. From fjords to rivers, from sagas sung in smoky halls to whispers in Byzantine palaces, his story is the tale of all who wear steel with pride, a dance with danger, a search for meaning, and a pact made in conflict and fire with the gods or fate, or both. He is far from home, but closer than ever to the destiny he's chased since boyhood, because for Sigurd, and for all who walk the warrior's way, the journey never ends. It only changes the battlefield. And now we shift from longboats to legions, from the salt-stained sagas of Vikings to the iron discipline of Rome. Meet Julius Eubius. Born not in the heart of the empire, but on its edge, where Roman roads end and wild forests begin, Germania. A land of thick trees, thicker accents and tribal loyalties that don't bend easily to Roman law. His people are the Ubii, one of the many tribes Rome hasn't quite crushed, but has managed to entice just enough to serve. His grandfather fought under Julius Caesar, likely as a mercenary, the kind of man who swings a sword for coin, not country. His father, Wut, chose a harder, longer path, 25 years in the auxiliary, not as a citizen, as a tool, sent to guard flanks, man outposts, and absorb the first blow when the enemy charged. The auxiliaries got less pay, less prestige, and more danger. They were cannon fodder in togas, but if they survived, if they bled long and loyally enough, they earned it. Roman citizenship, a scroll, a new name, and a whole new life. When Wut returns from Pannonia and Lycia, it's not the wrinkles that catch Julius's eye, it's the gladius. Roman steel, short and sharp, a blade that means not just soul-faller, but legionary, not just a fighter, but a citizen, a man who made it. Julius watches his father speak in Latin, eat strange foods, trim his hair, Roman style, and wear a belt the way only veterans do, and he wants in. Not as an auxiliary, not as a border guard, as a legionary, a real Roman, marching beneath the eagles, part of the machine. And Rome, struggling to hold the Rhine, looks back at him and says, "We could use more like you." Because Germania isn't going quietly. It's a land of shifting alliances, ambushes in forests, and tribal warriors who don't fear loss but live to embarrass Rome. And Rome, for all its roads and legions and bronze-faced discipline, is stretched thin. It needs new conflict. And Julius, he's ready to give it. To trade in the thatched roof and tribal songs for drills, discipline and destiny. To wear the red cloak, to bear the eagle. He's ready to march. Not just into battle, but into history. Julius Eubius is no longer the wide-eyed boy standing at the edge of the village, dreaming of Rome's banners waving over distant hills. He is now a citizen, like his father before him, one of the few tribal-born granted the privilege by conflict and battle. But that shiny new citizenship doesn't come with a title, it comes with a mop. As a munifex, the lowest rank in the Roman war machine, Julius begins with the unglamorous jobs, digging latrines, fetching water, cutting firewood, hauling equipment in mud, thick as porridge. Not exactly what he imagined when he pictured himself in polished armor beneath the eagle standards. But every legionary starts here. It's not glory, it's grind. And then the real work begins. 6 months of training every day, marching till his feet are raw, learning the precise movements of a cohort, how to hold a scutum, a body-length curved shield that turns a man into a wall, and how to use the gladius, a short sword made for thrusting, not swinging. It's not a dance. It's severe, efficient, and exhausting. He learns the Roman way of war. You don't fight for yourself. You fight to protect the man to your left because he's guarding your right. Discipline is drilled so deep it replaces instinct. When a centurion shouts, you move. No questions, no hesitation, because hesitation gets you and your brothers defeated. His other weapon is the pilum, a javelin with a long, narrow neck and a soft metal tip designed to bend on impact. Throw it into an enemy's shield and suddenly that shield's a burden, useless. The enemy is now wide open and terrified. At night, Julius sleeps on hard ground, eats from communal pots and dreams of rank, of maybe one day becoming a centurion, the hard-nosed leaders who bark orders and wear their status in crests and scars. But that path is narrow, steep, and mostly barred to those not born into the right toga. For now, Julius earns respect the Roman way by surviving. He looks like every other legionary now, standard armor, regulation gear, but the truth is cracks are forming in the uniformity. As the empire spreads, so does diversity in its ranks: Gauls, Iberians, Syrians, Thracians. And with them come different styles, different weapons, even different gods. The clean lines of the early legions begin to fray. But Julius is here for the core of it: discipline, pay, and purpose. He might have started as a boy on the fringe of empire, a son of barbarians, but now he marches under the eagle. He's Roman, and the world had better take notice. The training is behind him now. The muck, the drills, the endless shouts of centurions who seemed born angry. Julius Eubius is a soul follower of Rome. His gladius hangs high on his right hip, polished, ready. A short, swift blade made not for showy swordplay, but for stabbing, quick, lethal, unflinching. It's not about flair, it's about efficiency. In battle, it's not the longest sword that wins, it's the one that strikes first. At his side, a pugio, the Roman dagger, a last resort, a close-quarters defeater. Not meant to be drawn often, but when it is, it speaks in red. But above all else, there's the scutum, his shield, curved like a barrel, taller than his knee, heavy and unyielding. It is his first defense, his mobile wall, and the centerpiece of Roman tactics. With it, he can bash, protect, and form part of something greater, the testudo, the tortoise. A formation so tight and disciplined that it deflects arrows like rain on stone. When the testudo advances, shields overlapping top and sides, it becomes a walking fortress, perfect for sieges, perfect for show, imperfect for forests. And Germania is all forest, thick woods, uneven ground, ambushes from behind every tree. Julius learns the hard truth. Roman tactics were forged in the open fields of Gaul, not the dense, tangled nightmare north of the Rhine. In Germania, the tortoise can't crawl, the lines can't hold. The enemy doesn't fight fair. They vanish into trees, then strike like wolves. Still, Julius adapts, because that's what Romans do. Behind the front, the machinery of empire rolls on. The barracks bustle, reports are written, guards rotated, medics patch wounds in field hospitals. The mess cooks groan about rations. Morale is kept high with concerts and performances. Gladiators, if you're lucky, bawdy poets if you're not. Every day runs on schedule. Even war, in Rome's eyes, is a system. And Julius, he's finding his place in it. No longer just a tribal boy dreaming of honor. He's Roman now, and he's marching towards something darker, because he's heard the stories, not just of victories, but of vengeance. 50 years before his time, Caesar himself, Julius Caesar, the name every Roman boy hears whispered like a god, won his crowning triumph at Alesia. He faced Vercingetorix, the Gaul with fire in his veins and unity in his grip, and Caesar, with walls within walls and a brilliance for siege warfare, broke him. But that was in the open. That was against a man who stood and fought. What waits for Julius Eubius in the forests of Germania? That's not Caesar's war. That's something wilder, something more personal. And it's coming. In 52 BCE, Julius Caesar wasn't just flexing muscle, he was redefining warfare. Vercingetorix, the chieftain of the Gauls, had rallied the tribes under one banner, a rare and dangerous thing. Charismatic, cunning, and with a deep understanding of Celtic warfare, he dug in at Alesia, a fortified citadel perched atop a hill, surrounded by ravines and natural defenses. He thought he had the upper hand, high ground, strong walls, reinforcements on the way. Caesar looked at that hill and didn't blink. Instead of storming it, he encircled it. 10 miles of wall built from scratch, ditches, palisades, traps, enough to starve Vercingetorix into desperation. But Caesar wasn't done. He knew help would come for the Gauls. So he built a second wall, 15 miles around, facing outward. Now the Romans were the ones trapped in a ring, but one they had crafted themselves. 2 fortifications, 1 siege, a masterclass in strategy. When the relief army came, the Romans were ready. Outnumbered, surrounded, pressed from both sides, they held. Every soul-faller knew his place. Every trench was dug to plan. They weren't just fighters, they were builders, engineers, machines of discipline. Caesar once claimed he won with a spade, not a sword, and Alesia proved him right. When it ended, some 40,000 Gauls lay dead. Vercingetorix surrendered, was paraded through Rome, and eventually executed. Alesia became legend. For Julius Eubius years later, it becomes lesson. He trains in full kit, 20 kilograms strapped to his back. He marches 20 miles a day, not as punishment, but as preparation. He digs trenches, builds camps, learns to cut timber, and erect defenses as fast as he can swing a sword. His drills are relentless. Bloody battles are won with conflictless drills. It's not glamour, it's grind. He learns that logistics are what win wars, that a soul-faller's true power isn't in how loud he shouts, but in how precisely he obeys. That Rome doesn't conquer because it's braver, but because it's smarter. And as he sweats under the sun, pack digging into his shoulders, feet pounding the dust, Julius begins to understand this isn't just training. This is how empires are built, and now it's real. Julius Eubius stands before his commander, the sweat of training still clinging to him, the weight of discipline heavy on his shoulders, and he speaks the words that will bind him to Rome for life. Not just an oath, a transformation. He swears by the gods of Rome, the names of his ancestors, and by his own conflict and breath. He pledges unquestioning obefalence, total loyalty. From this moment on, he is no longer protected by civilian law. His commander is now judge, jury, and if need be, severe punishmenter. Disobedience isn't punished with a warning, it ends in loss. And desertion, worse, shame, dishonor, a life erased. Julius swears to serve Rome for his full term, to never abandon the eagle, to respect comrades and civilians alike, and to fall if Rome demands it. He is now a soul-faller of the Roman Empire. The training has already tested him, marching with 60 pounds strapped to his back, running, vaulting, swimming in armor, using the gladius, pilum, sling and bow with deadly precision, digging trenches after endless marches, setting up camps fortified with wooden stakes, waking before dawn to tear it all down and do it again. And if he faltered, if he forgot his sword, while digging a trench, as one poor soul did under the infamous General Corbulo, he could be executed on the spot. Worse, if the cohort failed and no single culprit emerged, decimation, 1 in 10, chosen by lot, executed by their own comrades as a message. Rome doesn't care who messed up. Rome demands excellence or conflict. Julius has survived it all, not just with his life, but with respect. He's seen what happens to slackers, to the soft, to the unlucky, and he's still standing. Now, in the year 15 CE, Julius marches to join a legion on campaign. The world burns in pieces and Rome is there to press its boot into the ashes. Wars rage on multiple fronts. Victories are common, but when Rome loses, it loses big, spectacularly. And Germania, wild and unbroken, remains the bleeding thorn in Rome's sandal. Julius doesn't flinch. His blade is sharp. His oath is fresh. And now, at last, his march begins. The scars of Teutoburg still sting. Only a few years have passed since the Roman Empire suffered one of its most humiliating defeats, not at the hands of some distant, exotic enemy, but deep within the dripping, tangled forests of Germania by a man who had once called Rome home, Arminius. Born of the Cherusci, raised by Romans. As a child, he was taken hostage, a common Roman practice, a blend of diplomacy and insurance. He was educated, drilled, and even given the honor of leading an auxiliary cavalry unit, trusted, respected, but never truly Roman. Rome gave him armor, not acceptance. So Arminius waited, listened, learned. And when the time came, he betrayed everything he had been taught. In 9 CE, General Publius Quinctilius Varus marched 3 legions into Germania. They were confident, experienced, and utterly unprepared for what awaited. Arminius, still pretending loyalty, led them straight into the Teutoburg forest, a labyrinth of mud, mist, and betrayal. It wasn't a battle, it was a mass attack. The narrow paths, thick trees, and boggy terrain turned Roman formations into chaos. The legions couldn't maneuver, their shields caught branches, their javelins were useless without open ground, and the auxiliaries, the supposed allies, turned on them. All 3 legions were wiped out. Some men broke, others tried to flee. Most falled, few ever returned. Varus himself, realizing the scale of the disaster, fell on his sword. It became known as the Varian disaster, Clades Variana, a name spoken in shame and fear for generations. Rome, for all its roads and legions and discipline, had been gutted by one of its own students, a man who used their tools to forge his own revenge. The lesson was clear: never underestimate the forest, never forget that a trained enemy is still an enemy, and never assume that Rome's power is absolute, especially when the trees whisper otherwise. For Julius Eubius, now sworn in and marching east, the ghost of Teutoburg looms large. It is the reason his commanders are cautious, the reason drills are relentless, the reason every march, every trench, every test feels like life or loss. Because in Germania, sometimes it is. And so Julius Eubius finds himself alone, not in a camp, not on a drill field, but deep in the green jaws of Germania. The forest breathes around him, wet earth, moss datak trees, whispers of movement that could be wind, or worse. One moment, he had marched with his centuria, shields up, gladius close. Then the attack came, fast, screaming, from nowhere and everywhere. The Germanic tribes fighting their way, Arminius's way, not in lines but in sudden bursts, hit and run, guerrilla, chaos. Now Julius is cut off, separated, a Roman scout, explorator, trained to map terrain, watch troop movements, sniff out ambushes. Now he is the prey. He moves slowly, every step measured, every breath caught on thorns. His thoughts twist with the trees. These lands are his by conflict. His father was born in a village like the ones hiding out here. These people, his enemies, are also his kin. If they catch him, will they see a traitor, a cousin, a target? He tightens his grip on the gladius. The forest doesn't care about conflict lines. Back in the heart of the empire, they tell stories of honor and vengeance, of eagles lost and eagles reclaimed. At Teutoburg, those 3 legions, the 17th, 18th, and 19th, vanished into mist and mud, thousands dead. Their eagle standards captured, the ultimate Roman disgrace, symbols of identity, of honor, gone. And yet Rome, as always, returned. Germanicus, the Golden General, had marched back into this haunted land, reclaimed 2 of the eagles, gave the empire something to cheer for, but the land never bent. And in time, Rome stopped trying. East of the Rhine would never wear a toga. Now Julius crouches under dripping branches, remembering those stories and wondering if he'll live to add his own. He knows if he's caught, he might be harshly punished, hung from a tree or worse. These warriors don't forget. Arminius proved that. The name still echoes generations later, a boy raised by Rome who gave it back its darkest hour. And further down the timeline, the trees whisper of another. Alaric, 4 centuries later, another son of Germania, marching on the eternal city. The first to sack Rome in 800 years. A reminder, the empire may never break, but it will bend. For now, Julius bends with it. He moves like a shadow, knowing he cannot outmuscle the forest, only outlast it. The Roman road ends here, but his story does not. Not if he can help it. Julius Eubius survives. Not because of brute strength, not because of luck, but because somewhere between his Germanic roots and Roman training, he became something more than either. He moves through the forest not as a frightened man, but as one forged by it. The boy who once hunted in the woods with his father now evades enemies through those same instincts. He knows the trees, the wind, the sound of movement not his own, but it's the discipline of the legion, the iron spine built from endless drills, the muscle memory of formation and formation breaking that carries him through the darkest hours, starving, bleeding, alone. He never forgets who he is, a Roman, not by birth, but by conflict, earned, not given. His loyalty isn't to the forest or to old tribal gods carved in bark. It's to the eagle, the standard, the dream of Rome, an idea of nationhood that transcends lines on a map. To Julius, Rome is not just buildings or borders, it's the discipline, the oath, the brotherhood in battle. It's everything he became when he stepped into the legion. By the time he finds his cohort, or they find him, he's not the same man who was separated days ago. He is harder, quieter, sharper. And he is certain he will live and fall for Rome. But history doesn't bend to loyalty. The borderlands between Rome and Germania are blurring. Once wide and wild, filled with tribes trading furs for salt, the 5th century brings a new tide. The Pax Romana begins to shatter. The tribes no longer knock, they break down the gates. The Roman military, once a machine of precision, begins to crack from within. Its soulfallers tired, its coffers thin, its enemies bolder. Rome collapses not in one final blaze, but in 1,000 small retreats. And when it falls in the west in 476 CE, it's not with the crash of a statue, but the soft closing of a chapter. Yet something remains, the spirit of the legion, the discipline, the ideal. Men like Julius carried that fire through the dark. And even as the world shifted, empires fell and cities changed hands, the Roman way of war, the Roman idea destroyed on. Even when the eagles returned one by one from Teutoburg's cursed woods, the aura of invincibility was already gone, the spell broken, but the legacy unyielding, immortal. Julius Eubius walks the warrior's path not for glory, not for gold, but for something greater, to stand for something in a world where everything falls, to fight, to endure, and to remind the future that even in collapse, greatness once stood tall. He was Roman, and that meant something. Kanesh. The name alone is a talisman, not human, whispered as both protection and warning. In a world where evil spirits were thought to stalk the cradles of the weak, naming a child inhuman was meant to fool fate itself. But fate is not easily tricked. Kanesh's life begins in shadows, an orphan, raised not by doting kin but among reluctant relatives who offered shelter like a loan, not a gift. He is not coddled, he is not loved, he is hardened. Among the Mongols of the 13th century, that's as good a beginning as any. His childhood echoes that of the great Temujin Genghis Khan, but where Temujin rises to unify the steppe and command the world, Kanesh will never see a throne. No banners bear his name, no poets sing of him. He is not the hammer, he is one of the 1,000 iron nails, but the Mongol war machine, it needs every nail. As a young man, Kanesh is absorbed into the massive, meticulous clockwork of conquest. Mongol warfare isn't a chaotic tide, it's a razor-sharp current of precision. Small cavalry bands trained to act independently, to strike like vipers, then vanish like ghosts. There's discipline here, more than most imagine. Orders are obeyed not from fear, but because disobedience means loss, not just yours, but your entire Arban, the group of 10 you ride with, sleep beside, bleed for. Kanesh learns fast, aim true, ride hard, and never hesitate. The bow becomes his soul. Drawn from horseback, it sings in arcs of loss. He trains in winter, when others rest. The cold bites, the wind howls, but the arrow still flies. Speed is everything. One day, his unit rides over 100 kilometers without stopping. That's not exceptional, that's Tuesday. And then there is the other side, the darkness beneath the discipline. When the cry goes up, feed the horses, Kanesh knows what it means. It is not about oats, it is the code for mass attack, for smoke rising from burning homes, for the stillness of a town that will never speak again. Artisans may be spared, bakers, blacksmiths, the useful, the rest, ashes. Kanesh does not relish it, but he does not flinch. This is the Mongol way. War is not a negotiation. It is an announcement. We are here, you are not. And still beneath the steel and fire, Kanesh wonders. Not aloud, never aloud, but deep within. Is this all there is? The thrum of hooves, the hiss of arrows, the silence after? Is his name a curse, or simply prophecy? He will never be a Khan, but Kanesh rides for one. And in the Mongol Empire, sometimes that is enough. For glory may fade, but the empire, carved by thunder and ruled by shadow, will remember its riders. Even the ones no one else will. To ride with the Mongols was to ride with a storm. And for Kanesh, that meant becoming not just a soul faller, not just a defeater, but a legend in motion, an echo of fear that lingered long after the hooves had vanished over the horizon. When the Mongols entered a city, it was a reckoning. If the city surrendered, its people might live, might. If it resisted, there would be no mercy. Everything not tied down was taken. Everything else? Burned, erased. People defeated by the thousands, sometimes tens of thousands. Not for chaos, for message. a warning scrawled in conflict across the steppe: resist and you will be forgotten. In the silence that followed, rulers often wouldn't even attempt to reclaim their cities. The Mongols had left, but the fear hadn't. Those left behind were living on the edge of the Mongol frontier, and no one wanted to be next. Ganesh rode in that shadow. He knew what was expected: kill without hesitation, break resistance before it rises, commit acts that by today's standards would be called extreme wartime actions. But these weren't today's times. This was the Middle Ages, the age of severity, of fire and iron, where mercy was rare and often seen as weakness. And the Mongols, they weaponized their cruelty. They encouraged the fear, spread rumors of pyramids built from skulls, of rivers clogged with corpses, of cities turned to ash within days. Some of these stories were true. Some were exaggerated. All were effective. They didn't just fight wars, they ended them before they began. Cities surrendered without a single arrow loosed. That was victory. True, some of the darkest legends, like the Mountain of 55,000 Skulls, belong to Timur, Tamerlane, who rose after the fall of the Mongol Empire, hoping to revive it in his own conflict-soaked image. But the Mongols laid the groundwork. Timur just turned it up to 11. What made Ganesh and his comrades so terrifying wasn't just what they did, it was how they did it. With precision, with speed, with harmony between man and beast that no other army could match. Their secret weapon wasn't numbers or gold, it was the horse, compact, rugged, and tireless. These weren't the towering war horses of European knights. They were ponies by comparison, but they were tough. Every warrior rode with 3, 4, even 5 mounts, switching as needed to maintain relentless momentum. When one tired, he'd switch. If one foaled, he'd eat. Nothing wasted, nothing slowed. Ganesh's saddle wasn't just a seat, it was home. His bow, his tools, his sustenance, all hung there. The horse was a weapon as much as the sword. It made the Mongols a ghostly force, everywhere and nowhere at once. And in the middle of that thunderstorm rode Ganesh, not a general, not a Khan, just a cog in the vast roaring machine, but a deadly one. And when the Mongol horde passed through, nothing was the same. Not even the silence. To ride as a Mongol warrior was not just to master the horse, it was to become part of it. Ganesh, like every child born under the sky tent of the steppe, was likely astride a pony before he could form full sentences. Horses were not luxury or livestock. They were the lungs, legs, and life conflict of Mongol survival. The bond was total, intimate, unbreakable. He knew the sound of a tired horse's breath, the slight change in gait before a stumble. He knew how to pasture them, water them, feed them on the move. He knew how to ride 4 in a day without defeating one. And when hunger called, he knew how to make a meal from raw meat, softened and warmed under saddle by the heat of the horse's flank and his own weight pressing it down. Was it gourmet? Not even close, but it kept a warrior alive. So did drinking the milk of a mare, still warm from the body. The Mongol horse wasn't a war horse in the Western sense. It was small, shaggy, almost scrappy, but tough as iron, and fast. On campaign, Ganesh could cover 60, 80, even 100 miles in a single day. While the enemy sat, still adjusting stirrups, the Mongols had already scouted, attacked, and vanished. And then came the bow, compact, curved, severely efficient. The Mongol bow was their thunder. From the back of a galloping horse, Ganesh could fire forward, sideways, and famously behind him. spinning in the saddle mid-charge, loosing arrow after arrow with terrifying accuracy. It was the dance of loss, and he knew every step. Their tactics were ghosts turned into weapons, feigned retreats, turning and fleeing in chaos, baiting the enemy to give chase, only to whirl around in synchronized arcs and rain hell on their pursuers. It was psychological warfare disguised as cavalry brilliance, and it all flowed back to the horse. The Ordu, the Mongol camp, wasn't just a tent city. It was a mobile empire, a schooling ground. Kanesh saw diplomats raised there, warriors forged there, philosophers born between saddle and yurt. Even Persian historians like Juvaini, who chronicled the rise of Genghis Khan, found their sophistication sharpened in the fires of Mongol camps, because everything was there: the warrior, the animal, the code. To be Mongol was to be in motion, to think in miles, not borders, to carry your world with you on hooves, under leather, through wind. And for Kanesh, to live that way was never a burden, it was home. Kanesh rides beneath the endless sky, a lone figure etched against a sea of waving grass. A warrior, yes, but also a shadow of a people who've always blurred the lines between battlefield and home. He was never much for crowds, even in the tightly organized Ordu, the great mobile camps of the Mongols. He was the one who wandered just a little farther from the fire, choosing the company of his horses over loud talk and crowded tents. Not because he feared others, but because, deep down, Kanesh was built for silence, for solitude, for the patient rhythm of hoofbeats and wind. And yet, even in his solitude, he's never truly alone. A horse always lingers nearby, grazing, watching. His horse is not just transportation, it is bedroll, battle companion, and brother. Together they've traveled thousands of miles without ever needing a road. His entire life has been one long training ground. From boyhood, Kanesh was taught to fight, not just how to hold a sword or draw a bow, but how to fight from the saddle, twisting, balancing, releasing arrows behind him without breaking stride. Where other children played, he practiced. Where other warriors charged forward, he feigned retreat, only to pivot and rain loss with shocking precision. And the bow, the weapon of his soul, short, curved, deadly, built not for ceremony, but for survival. A Mongol bow is no longbow. It is a whisper of vengeance, a blade of wind. Lightweight and swift, it bends with the rhythm of war. Mounted, Kanesh can fire in any direction, forward, sideways, behind, while galloping at full speed. His arrows don't just fly, they hunt. But the Mongol way isn't just distant loss from horseback. There's steel too, close quarters, daggers, curved swords, and when the need arises, heavier armor, lances, mail. Kanesh has fought with them all. Still, even in close combat, his secret weapon might be silk. Under his tunic, next to his skin, he wears a fine layer of it, not for fashion, for survival. If an arrow pierces him, the silk threads twist around the shaft, stopping it from driving deeper. Later, the arrow can be drawn out by pulling on the silk. Less tearing, less bleeding, more chance to fight another day. The Mongols didn't just survive war, they stuffoled it, optimized it, lived it. Even in peace, they organized their lives like soul followers. Their camps weren't random clusters of tents. They were formations, units, discipline, a society where every child was a scout, every adult a soul faller, every horse a lifeline. Today, centuries later, on the steppe, the world has changed. But not entirely. Outside the hum of Ulaanbaatar, the modern capital, Mongol families still move with the seasons, still live in round tents, gurs, that looked like distant cousins of the yurts Kanesh once slept in. They sip milk vodka, gaze at stars, and live on horseback in ways that would make their ancestors proud. The world may have moved on, but the steppe still remembers. And somewhere out there, if you listen hard enough, you might hear the echo of hooves and see a lone rider, silent, watchful, Kanesh. Kanesh grips the reins loosely, his breath steaming in the bitter air. Around him, a circle unfolds, not of tents or battle lines, but of riders, thousands of them. The Nurga has begun. The great winter hunt isn't just about food, it's about mastery. It's training disguised as tradition, war tactics dressed up as celebration. For Kanesh, it's his first. And failure isn't just embarrassing, it's punishable. Let a single deer or fox slip through and you might as well wear your shame like a second saddle. He doesn't plan on wearing shame today. The riders spread out across the horizon, their invisible circles stretching for hundreds of kilometers. Slowly, methodically, they begin to close in. No rushing, no chaos, just silent, calculated pressure. Birds scatter, hares bolt, but not far, nowhere far enough. The hunt becomes a ballet of precision. Signals flash from hilltops. Scouts shout directions. Riders adjust, realign. Day bleeds into night, and still the circle tightens. Horses are switched, arrows knocked, but not released. The animals inside are losing their minds, confused, panicked, stampeding, but none can escape. Kanesh watches it all with quiet satisfaction. This too is battle, this is control. Only when the commander gives the word, halt, does the first shot ring out, not before. That would be unthinkable. Order is sacred, even here, especially here. And then the feast? The animals are defeated, not in frenzy, but in purpose. Their meat salted, preserved for the severe months ahead. This is no sport. It is survival. It is preparation for the real thing, when the prey fights back with arrows of their own. And Kanesh, he earns his place. His defeats are clean, his honor intact. He is, as always, quiet. But when the feast begins, when songs rise into the frozen sky and warriors drink deep, Kanesh sits near the fire, his hand resting on his bow, his eyes on the stars. In that moment, he's not just a defeater, he's a son of the steppe, a warrior raised not just by saddle and steel, but by silence, frost and fire. 900 years ago or yesterday, it wouldn't matter. The steppe remembers its own. And Kanesh, like the great Genghis before him, walks the wind with pride. Kanesh grips the reins loosely, his breath steaming in the bitter air. Around him, a circle unfolds, not of tents or battle lines, but of riders, thousands of them. The Nurga has begun. The great winter hunt isn't just about food, it's about mastery. It's training disguised as tradition, war tactics dressed up as celebration. For Kanesh, it's his first. And failure isn't just embarrassing, it's punishable. Let a single deer or fox slip through and you might as well wear your shame like a second saddle. He doesn't plan on wearing shame today. The riders spread out across the horizon, their invisible circle stretching for hundreds of kilometers. Slowly, methodically, they begin to close in. No rushing, no chaos, just silent, calculated pressure. Birds scatter, hares bolt, but not far, nowhere far enough. The hunt becomes a ballet of precision. Signals flash from hilltops, scouts shout directions, riders adjust, realign. Day bleeds into night, and still the circle tightens. Horses are switched, arrows knocked, but not released. The animals inside are losing their minds, confused, panicked, stampeding, but none can escape. Kanesh watches it all with quiet satisfaction. This too is battle. This is control. Only when the commander gives the word, halt, does the first shot ring out. Not before. That would be unthinkable. Order is sacred, even here, especially here, and then the feast. The animals are defeated not in frenzy, but in purpose. Their meat salted, preserved for the severe months ahead. This is no sport. It is survival. It is preparation for the real thing, when the prey fights back with arrows of their own. And Kanesh? He earns his place. His defeats are clean. His honor intact. He is, as always, quiet. But when the feast begins, when songs rise into the frozen sky and warriors drink deep, Kanesh sits near the fire, his hand resting on his bow, his eyes on the stars. In that moment, he's not just a defeater. He's a son of the steppe, a warrior raised not just by saddle and steel, but by silence, frost, and fire. 900 years ago or yesterday, it wouldn't matter. The steppe remembers its own. And Kanesh, like the great Genghis before him, walks the wind with pride. Kanesh grips the reins loosely, his breath steaming in the bitter air. Around him, a circle unfolds, not of tents or battle lines, but of riders, thousands of them. The Nurga has begun. The great winter hunt isn't just about food, it's about mastery. It's training disguised as tradition, war tactics dressed up as celebration. For Kanesh, it's his first. And failure isn't just embarrassing, it's punishable. Let a single deer or fox slip through and you might as well wear your shame like a second saddle. He doesn't plan on wearing shame today. The riders spread out across the horizon, their invisible circles stretching for hundreds of kilometers. Slowly, methodically, they begin to close in. No rushing, no chaos, just silent, calculated pressure. Birds scatter, hares bolt, but not far, nowhere far enough. The hunt becomes a ballet of precision. Signals flash from hilltops, scouts shout directions, riders adjust, realign. Day bleeds into night, and still the circle tightens. Horses are switched, arrows knocked but not released. The animals inside are losing their minds, confused, panicked, stampeding, but none can escape. Kanesh watches it all with quiet satisfaction. This too is battle. This is control. Only when the commander gives the word, halt, does the first shot ring out. Not before. That would be unthinkable. Order is sacred even here, especially here. And then the feast. Then the animals are defeated not in frenzy, but in purpose. Their meat salted, preserved for the severe months ahead. This is no sport. It is survival. It is preparation for the real thing when the prey fights back with arrows of their own. And Kanesh, he earns his place. His defeats are clean, his honor intact. He is, as always, quiet. But when the feast begins, when songs rise into the frozen sky and warriors drink deep, Kanesh sits near the fire, his hand resting on his bow, his eyes on the stars. In that moment, he's not just a defeater. He's a son of the steppe. A warrior raised not just by saddle and steel, but by silence, frost, and fire. 900 years ago or yesterday, it wouldn't matter. The steppe remembers its own, and Kanesh, like the great Genghis before him, walks the wind with pride, and even the storm of Genghis Khan. But before that end, before the silence returned to the steppe, the world would know his name in every tongue, spoken with awe, with fear, with reverence. Because Genghis, born as Temujin, didn't just conquer, he redefined conquest. His origin was hardship, his childhood was exile, his family disgraced, his mother abducted, his clan splintered. As a boy, he scrounged for roots, stole sheep to feed his brothers, survived betrayals by conflict. His brothers turned against him. His people turned their backs, and yet he rose. That kind of story doesn't just resonate in history books, it strikes something ancient in the human spirit. The exile who becomes emperor, the broken boy who returns unbowed, a legend formed not from birthright, but from sheer will. Genghis's first miracle wasn't conquest, it was unity. Before him, the Mongol world was a chaos of warring clans. The Tartars, the Naimans, the Merkits, all locked in endless conflict feuds across the steppe. But Temujin shattered the tribal barriers. He didn't just conquer them, he abolished the tribes. In their place, he created a new order. 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000 military units, not family ties. Loyalty flowed not through conflict lines, but through merit and allegiance to him. And those commanders of 10,000, hand-picked, unswayable, unshakable. He didn't just want warriors, he wanted Mongols. And once he had them, once the tribes were won, then came the storm. Into Persia, into China, into Russia, cavalry thunder rolled west and east alike. And when they hit the walls of mighty cities and their arrows could no longer reach the kings behind stone, Genghis adapted. Siege engines, engineers, trebuchets that hurled fire and stone, he spared no one, or rather, he gave them a choice. Serve him or perish. And so the Mongols learned to break cities as easily as they broke steppe raiders. Beijing fell, empires crumbled, emperors drank poison rather than face him. In time, his empire stretched from the edges of the Yellow Sea to the shores of the Caspian. 28 million square kilometers. The largest continuous empire the world has ever known. And still he rode, but even storms burn out. Genghis Khan's body would one day fall, his breath stilled, his grave hidden so that none could claim his bones. His sons and grandsons would carry his legacy forward, sometimes brilliantly, sometimes in ruinous conflict. Yet the name remained. Kanesh, years later, rides in that name's shadow, not a conqueror, not a Khan, just a man on a horse with a bow, shaped by the legacy of someone who turned hardship into empire. Because even after Genghis is gone, the steppe remembers, and it rides on. Kanesh rides with the wind at his back and a message pressed close to his chest, a single strip of parchment perhaps, but heavy with consequence. He doesn't know its contents and he doesn't need to. His mission is speed, silence, precision. He is 21, a scout, a courier, a whisper in leather and hooves, threading through the arteries of an empire that now stretches from the Sea of Japan to the fields of Hungary. The Yam, the Mongol relay system, is his world now. Dotted across the empire like stars in a constellation, each station holds fresh horses, hot broth, and perhaps a bedroll by a fire. But Kanesh doesn't sleep much. His body has learned to rest on horseback, to eat on the move, to dream with one eye open. His animals are his companions, his closest friends. He trusts them more than any human. The eagles he hunted with as a child taught him focus. His horses taught him endurance. None ever judged, none ever boasted, none ever lied. The humans, though? They chatter endlessly about politics, about the Khans, about borders that shift like riverbanks in spring. But Kanesh knows what truly binds the empire: communication. And the Mongols do it better than anyone. The Yam system is a masterpiece. Stations every 25 to 30 miles, messengers trained as warriors, letters that move with the speed of a storm. Kanesh can cross hundreds of kilometers in a single day, switching mounts, galloping hard, outrunning even memory. His path winds through the veins of empire, through Persia, through the Silk Road, past the ruins of old cities and the gates of new ones. He's seen more of the world by 21 than most will in a lifetime. He rides under the rule of Ögedei Khan now, the son Genghis chose to inherit his empire. And Ögedei isn't satisfied with what his father left behind. Where Genghis built, Ögedei expands into the crumbling edges of the Jin dynasty, into Russia, into Europe itself. In 1240, Ganesh rode past the smoking ruins of Kiev. By 1241, he's ferrying orders into Hungary, where the Mongol horde clashes with King Bela IV at the Battle of Mohi. The Hungarian knights fought bravely, but Ganesh knew it wouldn't be enough. Mongol cavalry, siege machines, encircling maneuvers, the same dance, always deadly. Europe shudders, cities lock their gates, churches pray louder. But the Mongols don't need prayers. They have messengers, they have Ganesh. He gallops down paths older than empires, carrying secrets, declarations, ultimatums. No trumpets, no crowds, just the constant rhythm of hooves, the cold of pre-dawn air, and the knowledge that his message could change the course of history. But for Ganesh, it's not about history. It's about the mission, the ride, the road ahead, and always the wind. What happened? Because just as Europe braced itself for the end of days, just as the hooves of Mongol horses thundered at the gates of Christendom, Ögedei Khan drank himself into oblivion. One night, one cup, too many. 65 years old and drunk to the bone, the supreme ruler of the Mongol world slipped from life. And just like that, the tide turned. No more forward march, no more flames across the fields, no more cities torn apart like parchment in a storm, because when a Khan falls, everything stops. The Mongol princes, no matter where they are or what conquests they are chasing, must return back to the Kurultai, the sacred council, where a new Khan will be chosen. Without that, no campaign can continue. There's no mandate, no unity. The horde pulls back, not in retreat, but in reverence. In 1242, they vanish from Europe like smoke on the wind, and just like that, the rest of the continent breathes again. But Ganesh doesn't. Not quite. He's still out there, riding between the yam posts, delivering word of the Khan's loss, watching as camps collapse and warriors wheel their horses eastward. He sees Hungary in ruins, entire villages emptied, 1 million dead. The Mongols hadn't just defeated Hungary, they'd scorched it. And now the rest of Europe, untouched, wonders, was this luck or mercy? Historians will debate it for centuries. Would Mongol rule have shattered Europe or sharpened it? After all, the Mongols didn't just destroy, they rebuilt, they learned, they absorbed. In Persia, they partnered with scholars, administrators, architects. They fostered trade, built networks, embraced diversity. They didn't just conquer lands, they conquered systems and improved them. Could Europe have become a new jewel in the steppe's crown? Ganesh doesn't ponder such things. He rides, delivers, watches. He knows only this: the horde could have gone further, would have gone further. But loss, as always, has the final word. The sky is quiet now. The storm has passed. Europe is spared, but the dust never fully settles. Not where the Mongols have ridden. For Ganesh, for the countless unnamed warriors who rode before him, and the few who remembered after, this was the only way, the warrior's way. A path not paved in gold, but in grit, in saddle sores and frozen breath, in the soft whisper of arrow fletching and the thunderclap of hooves. It was austere, brutal, demanding, but it forged something unshakable, something enduring. The Mongols will be remembered for their conquests, yes, for the cities they razed, the armies they shattered, The empires they reduced to smoke and silence. But beyond the conflict and fire, there's something else worth remembering. Their resilience, their adaptability, their discipline, their breathtaking capacity to learn, to absorb, to evolve. They didn't simply conquer, they connected. The Yam courier routes Ganesh once rode, those became the nervous system of a global trade network. Silk, spices, paper, printing, and ideas flowed across continents on trails first etched by Mongol hooves. In their wake came not just destruction, but unification. And when their empires crumbled, as all empires do, the Mongols didn't vanish, they blended. They became the Persians of the Ilkhanate, the rulers of the Yuan, the guardians of the Silk Road. They didn't go home because by then, everywhere had become a kind of home. That's the truth hidden under the helmets and war cries. The Mongol wave wasn't a thing to be simply feared. It was a force that reshaped the world. And Genghis Khan, he made sure his legacy would outlive fire and steel. Through his conflict, yes, millions today trace their ancestry to him. But also through the ideas, the systems, the revolutions of culture and movement that he set in motion. Ganesh, too, is part of that legacy. A silent figure, a courier in the cold, never seeking fame, only fulfilling his duty. But in every message he carried, in every route he rode, he helped hold together something astonishing. A world connected by conquest, but held by communication. The Mongols did not build monuments, they built momentum. And maybe, just maybe, that momentum carries on in us. In our global networks, in our wanderlust, in our restless spirit, in the way we still chase the horizon, by hoof, by wire, by wind,